I'm Dayton, 29, and never expected a birthday dinner for Mom would end with Dad's ultimatum. Give your room to Sarah, or get out. After 6 years of saving while living at home, despite my 6-figure tech salary, I was being treated like a teenager. That night, staring at my ceiling, something inside me snapped. 2 months later, I waved at my stunned family from my office window in my new house directly across the street from theirs. Hey everyone. Before I dive into what happened, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to family expectations, and let's get into this wild ride. Growing up in suburban Portland, I always had a knack for technology. While other kids played sports, I was disassembling computers and writing basic code. My parents, Frank and Marie, never quite understood my passion but supported it nonetheless. Dad ran his own construction business, honest work that built calluses on his hands and paid our bills. Mom taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school, bringing home stacks of papers to grade every night. They weren't wealthy, but they provided stability and emphasized education. I worked hard through high school, maintaining a 3.9 GPA while building websites for local businesses on the side. When college acceptance letters arrived, I earned a partial scholarship to State University for computer science, covering about half my tuition. My parents helped where they could, but I still graduated with $40,000 in student loans, a burden I was determined to eliminate quickly. After graduation, the job market for tech was booming. I landed a position at Tech Innovate, a growing software company developing cloud solutions for healthcare systems. My starting salary was $75,000 annually, more than Mom and Dad made combined. Within 3 years, I'd worked my way up to senior developer, then team lead by my 27th birthday. My current role as development manager came with a salary of $135,000, plus performance bonuses. Despite this financial success, I made the practical decision to live at home after college. Housing costs in our area had skyrocketed, and saving for my future seemed more important than independence. My parents initially welcomed this arrangement, charging me minimal rent that I supplemented by covering utilities and groceries. The plan was simple: live frugally, eliminate debt, and save aggressively toward my dream of starting my own tech company someday. By staying home, I eliminated my student loans within 18 months and accumulated nearly $400,000 in savings and investments over 6 years. My childhood bedroom became my sanctuary and workspace. I'd upgraded it with a professional desk setup, dual monitors, and custom-built shelving for my tech books and memorabilia. That room meant everything to me. It's where I taught myself Python at 14, built my first gaming PC at 16, and coded through countless nights during college. The bay window overlooked the maple tree, where Dad had hung a tire swing when I was 7. During stressful project deadlines, I'd often stare out at that tree, finding unexpected inspiration in its familiar branches. The walls held my history, framed certificates from coding competitions, my college diploma, and photos with my team at our product launches. This wasn't just a bedroom, it was the physical space where my identity had formed, where my dreams had taken shape. Our family dynamic shifted 8 months ago, when my younger sister Sarah graduated with a fine arts degree, specializing in digital media and painting. Unlike me, she'd attended an expensive private art school out of state, requiring significant loans despite my parents' contributions. After graduation, she moved to New York City, convinced she'd immediately find work at a gallery or design firm. Reality proved harsher than her expectations. 3 months of unsuccessful job hunting depleted her savings, and she reluctantly moved back home, bringing bitter disappointment with her. Mom and Dad converted our basement into a makeshift bedroom, but it wasn't ideal. The space was drafty in winter, occasionally flooded during heavy rains, and lacked the natural light Sarah needed for her artwork. I sympathized with her situation. The job market for art graduates was undeniably tough, especially compared to the demand for software engineers. I even offered to help her learn basic web design to enhance her employability, but she dismissed the suggestion, insisting she didn't want to sell out her artistic vision. As weeks turned into months, I noticed subtle changes in our household. Mom started mentioning how cramped Sarah felt in the basement. Dad commented more frequently about how I should have my own place at my age. Sarah would make passive-aggressive remarks about my luxurious accommodations whenever she passed my room. I tried ignoring the growing tension. I increased my monthly contribution to household expenses and helped Sarah set up better lighting in her basement space. But the undercurrent of resentment continued building, particularly from Sarah, who increasingly viewed me as the favored child enjoying premium real estate in the family home. What none of them acknowledged was that I wasn't staying home out of laziness or entitlement. I had a clear financial plan, ambitious savings goals, and was contributing substantially to the household. In my mind, this was a pragmatic arrangement, benefiting everyone. I saved money while helping my parents financially more than if I'd moved out. I never imagined this practical decision would culminate in a family ultimatum that would change everything. Mom's 56th birthday fell on a Friday in April. I'd planned carefully for the occasion, booking a reservation at Riverside Grill, her favorite restaurant, overlooking the Willamette River. Dad and Sarah were on board with the celebration, and I'd even invited Aunt Lisa and Uncle Dave to join us, knowing Mom appreciated family gatherings. That morning, I'd picked up Mom's gift, a white gold necklace with a small diamond pendant she'd admired months earlier in a jewelry store window. It cost nearly $2,000, extravagant perhaps, but I wanted to show my appreciation for everything she'd done for me throughout my life. The evening started perfectly. Spring had finally arrived after a dreary winter, and the restaurant's outdoor patio captured the golden hour sunlight. Mom was delighted by the surprise of seeing her sister and brother-in-law waiting at the table. The server brought champagne, and we toasted Mom's health, and another year of her shaping young minds through her teaching. The first hint of tension appeared when Sarah mentioned she'd had another unsuccessful job interview that week. They wanted 5 years of experience for an entry-level position, she complained. How is anyone supposed to break into the industry? I noticed Dad's jaw tighten slightly, a familiar sign of his concern about Sarah's financial situation. Mom reached over to pat Sarah's hand. The right opportunity will come along, honey. You're so talented. Conversation drifted to lighter topics through appetizers and main courses. I shared news about a successful project launch at work, and Uncle Dave discussed plans for his upcoming retirement. The server cleared our plates and brought Mom's favorite dessert tiramisu with a birthday candle. We sang. She made her wish, and then Dad cleared his throat. While we're all together, he said, there's something Marie and I wanted to discuss. His tone carried an unexpected formality that immediately put me on alert. Mom nodded, suddenly avoiding eye contact with me. We've been thinking about the current living arrangements. My stomach tightened. I'd sensed something brewing but hadn't expected it to surface during Mom's birthday celebration. Dad continued, his contractor's hands folded deliberately on the table. Dayton, your sister needs a proper workspace for her art, if she's going to build a portfolio and get her career moving. The basement isn't cutting it. I nodded cautiously. I could help set up better lighting, or maybe we could renovate. We need your room, Dad interrupted flatly. It has the best natural light in the house, and Sarah needs a real bedroom, not a basement. The table fell silent. Aunt Lisa's eyes widened slightly, and Uncle Dave suddenly became very interested in his coffee cup. My room? I repeated, certain I'd misunderstood. You're almost 30, Mom added, her voice gentle but firm. You have a great job. Most people your age have their own place. I looked at Sarah, who wasn't even attempting to hide her satisfied smile. The realization hit me. They'd discussed this extensively without me. I've been saving to start my own business, I explained, fighting to keep my voice level. The housing market is insane right now. My plan was always to... Plans change. Dad interrupted again, his tone hardening. Sarah needs that room more than you do right now. The injustice of the situation crashed over me. I'd been contributing significantly to the household, paying utilities, buying groceries, handling repairs Dad couldn't get to. I'd helped them replace their aging HVAC system last year, covering half the $12,000 cost without hesitation. I pay rent, I said quietly. I've been helping with expenses. And we appreciate that, Mom replied. But it's not the same as having your own place with your own responsibilities. Sarah leaned forward. Dayton, you can afford an apartment easily. I'm struggling just to find entry-level work. The conversation was clearly rehearsed, with everyone's talking points prepared, everyone except mine. Dad's expression hardened further. Look, it's simple. Either give up the room to your sister, or it's time for you to move out. You've got 2 weeks to decide. The ultimatum hung in the air like a thundercloud. Aunt Lisa attempted to diffuse the tension. Frank, maybe this isn't the best time to. No, it's fine, I interrupted, folding my napkin deliberately and placing it beside my half-eaten tiramisu. I think I understand the situation perfectly. Inside, I felt like a teenager again, powerless in my parents' home despite all my adult accomplishments. The difference was that teenagers can't afford alternatives. I could. I should go, I said, standing abruptly. I placed the small gift box with Mom's necklace beside her plate. Happy birthday, Mom. Her eyes registered surprise, perhaps at my controlled reaction. Dayton, don't leave like this. We can discuss. There's nothing to discuss, I replied, already reaching for my wallet to cover the bill. The decision's been made. I just wasn't consulted. Uncle Dave tried to intervene. Maybe everyone needs to sleep on this. I think I've been sleeping too long, I responded, surprising myself with the calm in my voice despite the hurricane of emotions inside. Enjoy the rest of the evening. I walked out of the restaurant into the cool spring evening, my mind racing. Behind me, I could hear Aunt Lisa's raised voice questioning Dad's timing. I didn't wait to hear his response. During the 20-minute drive home, I cycled through shock, hurt, anger, and finally, a strange clarity. The family home I'd contributed to financially and emotionally no longer had space for me. My sister's needs trumped my 6 years of financial support and responsible planning. I drove past our neighborhood, continuing until I reached Riverfront Park. Parking near the water, I watched the current flow steadily beneath the moonlight. The river didn't fight its banks. It simply found its path forward. Perhaps it was time I did the same. Returning home after midnight, I found the house dark and quiet. My parents and Sarah had apparently continued the birthday celebration without me. Entering my room, the space I'd soon be expected to surrender, I saw it differently, as if already viewing it through the lens of memory rather than presence. The desk where I'd developed my first successful app. The bookshelf filled with technical manuals and science fiction novels. The window seat where I'd spent countless hours, thinking, dreaming, planning. Every corner contained some fragment of my journey from awkward teen to successful professional. I opened my laptop and began calculating exactly where I stood financially. My savings and investment accounts totaled $392,000. My stock options at Tech Innovate, though not yet fully vested, were worth another $170,000. My credit score was 810, nearly perfect. The more I reviewed my financial position, the more a particular thought crystallized. I didn't need to downgrade to an apartment. I could purchase a house, a real home of my own, that no one could take from me. Sleep evaded me that night. Instead, I browsed real estate listings until sunrise, exploring neighborhoods, comparing amenities, calculating mortgage payments. Around 5 in the morning, a new listing appeared that made my heart rate spike. A craftsman-style house directly across the street from my parents' home had just hit the market. I'd always admired that house with its wraparound porch and mature oak trees. The previous owners, an elderly couple, had maintained it immaculately. According to the listing, it offered 5 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, and a dedicated office space with bay windows overlooking the street directly facing my parents' house. The asking price, $1.3 million. It was substantially more than I'd planned to spend, pushing the limits of my financial comfort zone. But something about the poetic justice of the location made my pulse quicken. I scheduled a viewing for 9 a.m., then finally fell into a brief, restless sleep. 3 hours later, I met Jessica Walsh, a real estate agent who seemed surprised by my eagerness to view the property so quickly after listing. "It just came on the market last night," she explained as she unlocked the front door. The house exceeded my expectations. Hardwood floors throughout, vaulted ceilings in the living room, a gourmet kitchen with granite countertops. The office space featured built-in bookshelves and the promised bay window, with a perfect view of my parents' home, including my soon-to-be former bedroom. "What do you think?" Jessica asked after the tour. "I'd like to make an offer," I replied without hesitation. Her eyebrows raised slightly. "Don't you want to see other properties for comparison?" "This is a significant investment. I know exactly what I'm looking for," I assured her. "This is it." That afternoon, I met with Bradley Cooper at First National Bank. As my financial advisor for the past 4 years, he'd helped me develop my investment strategy and savings plan. "A $1.3 million mortgage is stretching it, Dayton," Bradley cautioned, reviewing my finances. "Your income supports it mathematically, but it leaves little room for error." "What about $350,000 down?" I asked. "That would make the monthly payment more reasonable." Bradley nodded thoughtfully. "That changes the equation. You'd be putting down about 27%, which is solid. Your debt-to-income ratio would remain healthy." He typed some calculations into his computer. "With your income and credit score, we could offer a 30-year fixed at 3.2%. Monthly payment would be approximately $4,300, not including property taxes and insurance. It was nearly triple what I contributed to my parents' household, but still manageable with my salary, though it would delay my business startup plans by several years. "I want to proceed with the application," I decided. Bradley's expression turned serious. "May I ask what's driving this sudden interest in homeownership?" "6 months ago, you were committed to maximizing savings for your startup." I hesitated before sharing a condensed version of the family dinner and ultimatum. Bradley listened without interruption, then leaned back in his chair. "Sometimes the best investment isn't financial," he said finally. "I'll expedite your pre-approval." 2 days later, with pre-approval letter in hand, I submitted an offer on the house, $1.25 million, with a request for expedited closing. The sellers countered at $1.275. I accepted immediately. Throughout this whirlwind of activity, I maintained a facade of normalcy at home. My parents seemed to be giving me space after the dinner confrontation, interpreting my quiet demeanor as resignation or contemplation of apartment options. Sarah, meanwhile, had already begun discussing paint colors for her new room within earshot. I avoided family meals, working late, and eating at my desk. When interactions were unavoidable, I kept conversations brief and noncommittal. Dad attempted a gruff half-apology one evening. "We should have discussed it differently, but the decision still stands." I merely nodded, already mentally cataloging which belongings would make the journey across the street with me. The home inspection revealed minor issues, some electrical updates needed in the old knob and tube wiring sections, a water heater nearing the end of its lifespan, and chimney repairs. The sellers agreed to a $15,000 credit rather than completing the work themselves, which suited me fine. I'd prefer selecting my own contractors, perhaps not my father's company. As closing day approached, doubt occasionally surfaced during sleepless nights. Was I making a life-changing decision based on wounded pride? Was I over-leveraging myself financially just to make a point? Each morning, however, the sight of Sarah measuring my bedroom window for curtains renewed my resolve. This wasn't about pride. It was about establishing boundaries and claiming the respect my contributions and adult status deserved. The most difficult part was maintaining my secret. Several times, I nearly revealed my plans, particularly when Mom commented on the sold sign appearing across the street. "I wonder who bought the Peterson place," she mused one evening at dinner. "I hope it's a nice family. I'm sure the neighborhood will find out soon enough," I replied, focusing intently on my mashed potatoes. 30 days after that fateful birthday dinner, I signed the closing documents and received the keys to my new home. Standing on the my front porch, I felt a mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. The path forward had never been more clear or more terrifying. The 2-week ultimatum my father had delivered at Mom's birthday dinner had technically expired, yet I remained in my childhood bedroom, buying time before my revelation. My parents interpreted this as reluctance to leave, which only intensified their pressure campaign. Dad began leaving apartment listings on the kitchen counter, each carefully highlighted with rent prices well within my budget. Mom adopted a gentler approach, mentioning friends' children who loved their first apartments and the freedom of independent living. Sarah was the least subtle, frequently entering my room without knocking to discuss her plans for the space. "I'm thinking of an easel right where your desk is," she announced one evening, gesturing expansively. "The natural light is perfect for oil painting." I nodded noncommittally, continuing to work on my laptop while she described her vision for transforming my personal sanctuary into her art studio. The irony wasn't lost on me. She needed my room specifically for its natural light and spaciousness, yet had majored in digital media that could be created anywhere with a tablet and laptop. "When are you planning to move your stuff out?" she asked finally, the question I'd been avoiding. "Soon," I replied vaguely. "I'm finalizing arrangements." Sarah frowned, unsatisfied with my answer but unable to press further without seeming overly eager for my displacement. The family dynamics extended beyond our immediate household. Aunt Lisa called me several times, concerned about the situation. "Your father means well," she explained during one conversation, "but he's always been stubborn." "Are you doing okay with all this?" "I'm handling it," I assured her, careful not to reveal my plans even to her sympathetic ear. The fewer people who knew, the more impactful the eventual revelation would be. Uncle Dave took a different approach, inviting me for beers at his favorite pub. "Your dad pulled the same strong-arm tactics with me when I wanted to marry your aunt," he confided, testing to see if I'd stand my ground. "Maybe this is his misguided way of pushing you toward independence." I considered this perspective, but it didn't align with the facts. This wasn't a test. It was a clear message that my sister's needs superseded mine, regardless of my contributions to the household. As my secret house purchase progressed through escrow, unexpected complications arose. The appraisal came in $20,000 below the purchase price, requiring renegotiation with the sellers. The home inspection revealed active termites in a section of the basement, necessitating immediate treatment and repair. Each issue depleted more of my savings than anticipated. These financial stresses coincided with a critical period at work. Our team was finalizing a major healthcare management system that would be implemented across 3 hospital networks. As development manager, I was responsible for coordinating 4 sub-teams, managing client expectations, and ensuring quality control, all while mentally and emotionally preparing to move out of my family home. My performance inevitably suffered. During a crucial presentation to stakeholders, I blanked on details I would normally recite from memory. My team leader, James, covered smoothly, but his concerned glance told me my distraction hadn't gone unnoticed. After the meeting, he pulled me aside. "Everything okay, Dayton? You seem scattered lately." I hesitated before confiding in him. James was more than a colleague. We'd worked together for 5 years and occasionally socialized outside the office. "Family situation," I explained briefly. "I'm actually buying a house and moving out of my parents' place." His face brightened. "That's great news. First-time homeowner, exciting milestone." "It's complicated," I admitted, then shared an abbreviated version of the family ultimatum and my unexpected response. James whistled low. "Buying the house across the street is some next-level chess move," he commented. "Brilliant and slightly terrifying. Second-guessing myself a bit." I confessed. Don't, he said firmly. From what you've described, this isn't impulse, it's self-respect. He paused, then added, take tomorrow off. Get your head straight before the system launch next week. I accepted his offer gratefully. The day away from work allowed me to meet contractors for estimates on the electrical updates and water heater replacement. The costs were adding up. $12,000 for electrical work, $3,000 for a new water heater, $8,000 for chimney and roof repairs. My carefully constructed financial cushion was thinning rapidly. As moving day approached, the emotional temperature at home continued rising. A family meeting was called to discuss my apparent stalling tactics. It's been over 3 weeks since we discussed this, Dad began, his contractor's hands folded on the dining table, with forced patience. Sarah needs to set up her studio, and you haven't made any visible progress toward moving out. Mom's expression conveyed sympathetic firmness. We understand change is difficult, honey, but this transition is necessary for everyone. Sarah maintained a facade of innocence, as though she were merely a bystander rather than the direct beneficiary of my displacement. I don't want to rush you, she claimed unconvincingly, but I have a potential commission that requires studio space to complete. The performance was almost admirable in its coordination. They'd clearly discussed their approach beforehand, presenting a united front designed to overcome any resistance. I made a show of reluctant acceptance. I understand. I've been making arrangements. Dad's eyebrows lifted skeptically. What arrangements? Specifically, I've secured a new place, I replied truthfully. I'll be moving this weekend. The statement seemed to catch them by surprise. Perhaps they'd expected continued resistance or a counter-proposal. That's good, Mom said carefully. Where will you be living? Nearby, I answered vaguely. You'll see soon enough. The cryptic response clearly frustrated Dad, whose patience had worn thin. This shouldn't be some big mystery, Dayton. We're still your family. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. My family had made a significant decision, affecting my living situation without consulting me, yet expected complete transparency in return. You're right, I conceded with calculated calm. We're family. That's why I've been careful with my decisions. The final dinner before my planned move proceeded in uncomfortable silence. Sarah attempted conversation about her art projects. Mom inquired about my work, and Dad maintained a stoic silence that spoke volumes about his frustration with what he perceived as my difficult attitude. Little did they know that across the street, contractors were completing the final repairs on my new home. Furniture deliveries were scheduled for the following day, and a moving company would arrive early Saturday morning to transport my belongings approximately 150 feet from one side of the street to the other. The emotional crescendo of these weeks had reinforced my decision. This wasn't merely about a bedroom or living arrangements. It was about recognition, respect, and establishing healthy boundaries with the people who still viewed me as a dependent child, despite all evidence to the contrary. As I excused myself from that last tension-filled family dinner, I felt a strange sense of calm replace the hurt and indignation that had driven me initially. Tomorrow would bring the culmination of my plan, not as an act of revenge, but as a declaration of independence long overdue. Saturday morning arrived, with perfect early summer clarity blue skies, gentle breeze, ideal conditions for moving day. I'd been awake since dawn, methodically packing the last of my belongings into labeled boxes. My room, soon to be Sarah's art studio, looked increasingly barren as I emptied drawers, cleared shelves, and removed the posters and certificates that had personalized the space. Around 8 o'clock, I heard movement downstairs. Mom was preparing breakfast, the familiar sounds of coffee brewing and bacon sizzling drifting up the stairwell. Dad's heavy footsteps crossed from their bedroom to the bathroom, followed by the distinctive sound of the shower running. I continued packing, waiting for the inevitable inspection of my progress. It came 30 minutes later, when Mom knocked gently before opening my door, carrying a mug of coffee. "You're really doing it," she remarked, surveying the stacked boxes and half-empty closet. Her tone contained a mixture of surprise and what sounded almost like regret. "Did you think I wouldn't?" I asked, accepting the coffee with a nod of thanks. She sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "Honestly, your father thought you might dig in your heels. You've always been determined." I smiled faintly at the diplomatic description of what Dad had often called my stubborn streak. "The movers will be here at 10, I informed her, sipping the coffee prepared exactly how I liked it, with a splash of cream and no sugar. These small maternal gestures would be among the things I'd miss. "So soon?" Her eyes widened slightly. "We could have helped you, saved you the expense of professional movers." "It's easier this way," I replied, not mentioning that the moving company was merely one of many expenses I'd already incurred in my quest for independence. Mom lingered awkwardly, clearly wanting to ask questions but restraining herself. Finally, she said, "Your father and I are proud of you, you know." Taking this step, the statement contained layers of irony neither of us acknowledged. Their pride came only after forcing my hand, not from respecting my original plans and timeline. "Thanks," I replied simply, returning to my packing. By 9:30, my room contained neatly labeled boxes arranged by category: clothes, books, electronics, personal items. The furniture bed, desk, dresser would remain for Sarah's use, as my new home came partially furnished, and I'd already ordered custom replacements. At precisely 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Dad answered, and I heard him directing the movers upstairs. 3 men in matching blue uniforms appeared in my doorway, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Harrison?" The lead mover addressed me. "We're here for your belongings." "Everything ready to go?" Dad hovered behind them, his expression a mixture of resignation and curiosity. "So you hired professionals rather than asking for help," he observed, the hint of criticism unmistakable. "Seemed more efficient," I replied neutrally. "They can handle everything in one trip." Sarah appeared in the hallway, still in pajamas, her hair disheveled from sleep. Despite her apparent grogginess, I noticed her eyes scanning my room eagerly, already mentally arranging her art supplies in the space. "You're actually leaving," she stated unnecessarily, echoing Mom's earlier observation. "That was the ultimatum," I reminded her mildly. The movers worked efficiently, carrying boxes downstairs and loading them into their truck. The process took less than an hour, my life condensed into approximately 20 cardboard containers. As the last box disappeared down the stairs, I took a final look around the now empty room. Bare walls, vacant desk, window overlooking the familiar street where I'd learned to ride a bicycle, waited for the school bus, and watched countless seasons change through the branches of the maple tree. And directly beyond that tree, clearly visible from my window, my new home. Mom had prepared an impromptu farewell brunch: pancakes, eggs, the last of the bacon. We ate in uncomfortable silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging over the table. Dad finally broke it as the meal concluded. "So, are you going to tell us where you've moved? An apartment downtown? That new complex near your office?" I dabbed my mouth with a napkin, deliberately taking my time before answering. "Actually, I thought I'd show you." Mom brightened at this apparent olive branch. "We'd love to see your new place." "Great," I replied, standing from the table. "It's not far." Dad's brow furrowed at my cryptic response, but he followed as I walked toward the front door. Mom and Sarah trailed behind, exchanging confused glances. On the porch, I turned to face my family. This was the moment I'd anticipated for weeks, rehearsed in my mind countless times. Yet now that it had arrived, I felt strangely calm, even compassionate toward their impending surprise. "Ready?" I asked, gesturing for them to follow. We descended the porch steps and started down the front walkway. The moving truck was already parked across the street, the movers waiting beside it for my direction. I led my family to the curb, then stopped. Dad looked around in confusion. "Where are we going?" "We're here," I replied simply, turning to face the house directly opposite our family home. The beautiful Craftsman, with the wraparound porch and mature oak trees. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Dayton, what are you saying?" I reached into my pocket and withdrew the new house keys, dangling them where all could see. "I bought it. Closed on Thursday." The moment of comprehension dawned on each face differently. Mom's eyes widened in shock, her hand remaining pressed against her lips. Sarah's expression crumpled from confusion to disbelief, to something approaching outrage. Dad's reaction was the most complex initial confusion, giving way to realization, then a flash of anger, followed by what appeared to be reluctant respect. "You bought the Peterson place?" he finally managed, his voice hoarse. "That house, listed for over $1 million. 1.3, I confirmed. I negotiated them down to 1.275. Sarah found her voice, high-pitched with indignation. "You could afford that, but complained about giving me your room?" "I couldn't afford it," I corrected her calmly. "Not without significantly altering my financial plans. But when forced to choose between an apartment and establishing genuine independence, I made the decision that felt right." I turned and began walking across the street toward my new home. After a moment's hesitation, my family followed, drawn by curiosity if nothing else. The moving truck's rear doors stood open, the movers awaiting instructions. I gestured toward the front door. "You can start bringing everything inside. Master bedroom and office are on the right side of the second floor." With professional nods, they began unloading boxes, while I led my stunned family up the porch steps. The front door opened with a satisfying click of my new keys, revealing the spacious foyer with its hardwood floors and original woodwork. "This is yours?" Mom asked incredulously, turning in a slow circle to take in the vaulted ceiling and elegant staircase. "All mine," I confirmed. 5 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, and a dedicated office space with an excellent view. I guided them through the first floor. Gourmet kitchen with stone countertops, formal dining room, living room with fireplace, sunroom overlooking the backyard. Each new space elicited gasps of appreciation from Mom, and increasingly sullen silence from Sarah. Dad maintained a stony expression throughout the tour, asking only practical questions about the inspection results, property taxes, and maintenance requirements. His contractor's mind was assessing the investment, even as his father's pride struggled with the implications of my purchase. The tour culminated in the upstairs office, the room directly facing my former bedroom across the street. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided perfect visibility of our family home, including the window of the room Sarah had coveted so intensely. "This will be my workspace," I explained, gesturing toward the built-in shelving and window seat. "I can set up my development environment here and still enjoy that familiar view." Dad finally lost his composure. Is this some kind of elaborate revenge? Spending a fortune just to make a point? I turned to face him directly. "This isn't about revenge. It's about respect." For 3 years after college, living at home made perfect financial sense for everyone. The last 3 years, I stayed to help with household expenses and save toward my goals. At no point was I failing to contribute or taking advantage of the situation. Mom stepped forward, her expression pained. "We never meant to suggest you were taking advantage." "But that's exactly what the ultimatum implied," I interrupted gently. "That my presence was a burden, my contributions insufficient, my needs less important than Sarah's." "You have a 6-figure job," Sarah protested. "I'm just starting out, and I've supported this family financially for years while building toward my future," I replied evenly. "All I asked for was respect for my timeline and plans." Dad's face had reddened, a familiar sign of his emotions overwhelming his usual stoicism. "So your response is to buy $1 million house to prove What exactly? That I'm not a child to be ordered around, I answered. That I deserve the same consideration I've shown this family. That ultimatums have consequences. The statement hung in the air between us, weighty with implications. Through the window behind them, I could see the moving truck being unloaded, my possessions making their journey of independence approximately 150 feet across the street. You'll be house poor, Dad predicted grimly. That mortgage will eat every spare dollar. I made my calculations, I assured him. I'll manage. Mom's eyes had filled with tears. We'll hardly see you anymore. At this, I couldn't help but smile. Mom, I'll be living directly across the street. You'll probably see me more often than if I'd moved to an apartment across town. The absurdity of the situation finally punctured the tension. Sarah alone remained unmoved, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. So you get a whole house while I get a bedroom. That seems fair. Life rarely is, I replied, not unkindly. But you're getting exactly what you wanted, my room, with its perfect, natural light. I'm getting what I need, independence and respect. As the movers brought the first boxes upstairs, my family began to recognize the finality of the situation. This wasn't a theoretical discussion anymore. It was physical reality. My belongings were crossing the threshold of my new home, and with them, our family dynamic was irrevocably changing. Dad was the first to accept the new paradigm, extending his hand in a gesture that served as both concession and respect. Congratulations on your first home purchase, he said formally, though his eyes conveyed more complex emotions. If you need any advice on maintenance or repairs. I accepted his handshake, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. I'll know exactly who to call, I assured him, though I might get quotes from other contractors too. The subtle negotiating tactic wasn't lost on him. Another acknowledgement that our relationship had fundamentally shifted from parent-child to adults with separate households. As they prepared to leave, Mom pulled me into a tight hug. This wasn't how we wanted things to happen, she whispered. Me neither, I admitted. But sometimes the paths we're pushed toward turn out better than we expected. Standing on my new porch, I watched my family cross the street back to their home, our childhood home. Dad's arm around Mom's shoulders, Sarah trailing behind, casting one backward glance that contained equal parts envy and dawning comprehension. Then I turned to face my new reality. A beautiful home, a mortgage that would require careful budgeting, and the exhilarating, terrifying freedom of having claimed my independence on my own terms. The first week in my new home passed in a blur of deliveries, installations, and adjustments. My carefully selected furniture arrived piece by piece. A king-sized bed for the master bedroom, an ergonomic office chair, a sectional sofa for the living room. Each delivery represented another step toward creating a space that was uniquely mine. The most important setup was my home office. I positioned my desk perfectly in front of the bay window, arranging my dual monitors so I could alternate between work projects and the view across the street. The morning after I'd fully settled in, I made my first cup of coffee in my new kitchen, carried it upstairs to my office, and sat down to begin my workday. Through the window, I could see my parents' house, my former home, coming to life. Dad emerged first, retrieving the newspaper from the porch in his bathrobe. Mom appeared in the kitchen window, preparing breakfast. And there, in what was once my bedroom, Sarah pulled back the curtains to reveal her newly established art space, complete with an easel, positioned exactly where my desk had been. When she glanced across the street, I raised my coffee mug in a small salute. Her startled expression was followed by a hesitant wave before she quickly closed the curtains again. That simple exchange established the new pattern of our relationship. Acknowledgement without intimacy, proximity without closeness. We had become neighbors rather than housemates, our interactions governed by the physical and emotional distance I'd established. The family's reactions to my dramatic move varied significantly. Dad maintained a stoic facade, nodding curtly when we happened to collect our mail at the same time or crossed paths while mowing our respective lawns. His pride prevented him from fully acknowledging the flawed reasoning behind their ultimatum, but his occasional glances at my home revealed reluctant admiration for my decisive action. Mom proved more adaptable. 3 days after the move, she appeared on my doorstep with a casserole dish and an uncertain smile. "Thought you might not have had time to cook," she offered as I invited her inside. Her eyes widened as she took in the transformation of the house. I'd already painted several rooms, replacing the previous owner's traditional beige with more contemporary colors. The living room now featured a bold navy accent wall, while the kitchen shone with fresh white cabinetry I'd spent the weekend updating. "You've been busy," she observed, placing the casserole on the kitchen island. "Making it mine," I confirmed. "Would you like a tour of the changes?" That first visit established a new tradition. Sunday dinners at my house. Mom would bring dessert, I'd prepare the main course, and we'd share the kind of conversations that hadn't been possible within the parent-child dynamic of the family home. She spoke of her teaching frustrations, her concerns about retirement, her dreams of traveling adult topics she'd rarely discussed with me before. Sarah's reaction proved more complex. Initial resentment gave way to grudging curiosity about 2 weeks after the move. I spotted her studying my house from her formerly my window, clearly comparing the spaces. When I waved, she would quickly retreat from view, unwilling to acknowledge our new arrangement. The breakthrough came unexpectedly one Saturday morning as I worked on landscaping the front yard. Sarah approached hesitantly, hovering at the edge of my property. "Need any help?" she offered, her tone carefully casual. I straightened from planting hostas along the porch. "Sure. I've got another flat of plants that need to go in." We worked in silence for several minutes before she finally spoke again. "I didn't think you'd actually leave." "That was the ultimatum," I reminded her, keeping my tone neutral. "Yeah, but..." She gestured vaguely toward the house. "Not like this. Not to a place 3 times the size of Mom and Dad's." I continued planting, giving her space to process her thoughts. "I feel stupid now," she finally admitted. "Throwing a fit over a bedroom when you ended up with all this." The confession surprised me. It was never about the bedroom, I explained, sitting back on my heels. It was about respect, about acknowledging that I'd been contributing to the household while working toward my goals. She nodded slowly, digesting this perspective. "I was jealous," she admitted. "You've always known exactly what you wanted and how to get it. Everything seems to come easy to you." "Nothing about this was easy," I corrected her, gesturing toward the house. "I've worked 80-hour weeks for years, lived frugally despite a good income, sacrificed immediate gratification for long-term goals." Sarah studied the dirt beneath her fingernails. "Mom told me how much you were contributing to the household expenses." I didn't know. The admission represented the first crack in the wall between us. I offered her a spare gardening glove. "Help me finish this bed, and I'll show you the home office setup. Might give you some ideas for arranging your art space." That afternoon marked the beginning of a more authentic relationship with my sister. Not immediate reconciliation, but the foundation for something healthier than our previous dynamic of competition and resentment. My new independence affected other aspects of life in unexpected ways. Without the invisible constraints of living under my parents' roof, I began exploring interests I'd previously set aside. Joining a local rock climbing gym, taking weekend motorcycle rides along the coast, hosting dinner parties for colleagues. One such gathering introduced me to Jessica, not the real estate agent who'd sold me the house, but a fellow tech professional who had recently moved into the neighborhood. Our conversation at the party led to coffee the following weekend, then dinner the week after. By the 2-month mark in my new home, we were dating regularly, discovering shared interests in hiking, science fiction, and entrepreneurial ambitions. "I never would have met you if I'd stayed across the street," I remarked during one evening on my back porch, the string lights illuminating her smile as she sipped wine. "Your parents did you a favor?" she teased, unaware of how close her jest hit to truth. The professional impact of my newfound independence proved equally significant. The confidence I'd gained from standing my ground and establishing boundaries translated directly into my work performance. During a critical client presentation, I proposed a risky but innovative approach to a system integration problem that had stymied our team for weeks. "That's not our standard protocol," James noted during the planning meeting. "Standard protocols got us stuck," I pointed out. "Sometimes we need to rebuild rather than patch." My argument prevailed, and the resulting solution not only resolved the immediate issue but established a new framework our company would implement across multiple projects. 3 weeks later, the VP of Product Development called me into his office. "Your leadership on the Memorial Healthcare integration was exceptional," he began, sliding a folder across his desk. "We're creating a new division focused on healthcare innovations. I'd like you to consider heading it up. The promotion would mean a 40% salary increase, equity options, and the opportunity to build a team from the ground up, essentially a startup within the established company structure." It represented everything I'd been working toward, accelerated by at least 5 years. "I'll need the weekend to consider it," I replied, though my mind was already racing with possibilities. That evening, standing in my home office and looking across at my parents' house, I realized how profoundly my life had changed in just 2 months. The forced exit from my childhood home had catalyzed transformations I might have postponed indefinitely. Homeownership, career advancement, personal growth, and even new relationships. What had begun as a reaction to perceived injustice had evolved into a path forward I couldn't have anticipated. The view from my window was the same. The familiar street, the maple tree, the house where I'd grown up. But my perspective had fundamentally changed. I was no longer the adult son living in his childhood bedroom. I had become a homeowner, a neighbor, a potential division leader, a man fully standing in his independence. The pain of that birthday dinner ultimatum had forged something unexpected, genuine adulthood on my own terms. The following morning, I signed the promotion paperwork, accepting both the opportunity and the challenges it would bring. Then I called my parents and invited them to dinner at my house, a celebration of new beginnings and, perhaps, a step toward healing the breach that had formed between us. 3 months after moving into my house, I decided it was time for a proper housewarming. Not just Mom's Sunday visits or Sarah's occasional drop-ins, but a formal dinner bringing both families together under my roof. The invitation was deliberate. 6 o'clock, business casual attire, RSVP requested. The formality itself sent a message this wasn't a child seeking reconciliation, but an equal extending an olive branch. I spent the day preparing, marinating steaks, chilling wine, arranging the dining room with care. At precisely 5:55, the doorbell rang. My parents stood on the porch, Dad uncomfortable in a button-down shirt, Mom holding a bouquet of flowers and a bottle of wine. "Welcome," I greeted them, opening the door fully. "Thank you for coming." The slight awkwardness dissipated as they entered, complimenting the continued improvements to the house. I'd completed several projects since their last visit. Custom shelving in the living room, recessed lighting in the kitchen, a backyard patio perfect for evening gatherings. "You've done good work here," Dad acknowledged, his contractor's eye appreciating the craftsmanship. The simple praise carried more weight than lengthy apologies might have. Sarah arrived minutes later, bringing a framed piece of her artwork, a watercolor of our childhood home viewed from my new front porch. The perspective was telling. Both houses in the same frame, connected yet distinct. "Thought you might want this for your office," she offered. "To remember where you came from." The gesture surprised and touched me. "It's perfect," I told her honestly. "I know exactly where it belongs." Conversation flowed more easily than I'd anticipated as we moved to the dining room. Mom shared news about her school. Dad discussed a major renovation project he'd landed, and Sarah excitedly revealed she'd secured a position as a graphic designer at a local marketing firm. "They loved my portfolio," she explained, "especially the digital media pieces I created in my new studio space." The irony wasn't lost on anyone at the table. The room that had sparked such conflict had indeed helped launch her career, just as they'd hoped. Yet my forced departure had simultaneously accelerated my own professional trajectory. "I've been meaning to tell you all," I said as we finished the main course. "I accepted a promotion last month. I'll be heading up a new healthcare innovations division at Tech Innovate." Mom's face brightened with pride. "That's wonderful, honey." Dad nodded appreciatively. "Sounds like a significant step up." "It is," I confirmed. "More responsibility, larger team, better compensation. I'll be building something from the ground up, almost like the startup I've been planning for, but with company resources behind me." Sarah raised her wine glass. "To new beginnings," she proposed. For all of us, we clinked glasses, the simple toast acknowledging the strange journey that had brought us to this moment. After dessert, I invited them into the living room where coffee and after-dinner drinks awaited. The conversation turned reflective as we settled into comfortable seating. "I never thought I'd say this," Dad began hesitantly, "but maybe things worked out for the best." The admission clearly cost him some pride. Dad had never been one to acknowledge mistakes or reconsider decisions once made. "It wasn't what any of us planned," I agreed, "but I've learned that sometimes the best paths aren't the ones we choose initially." "I feel terrible about how it all happened," Mom confessed. "We should have discussed things differently." I considered this, swirling the bourbon in my glass. "The outcome might have been the same," I acknowledged. "I probably needed the push to make this leap. But yes, the approach could have shown more respect for what I'd contributed to the family." Dad shifted uncomfortably at this gentle criticism, but nodded in acknowledgement. "You were always the responsible one." We took that for granted. The simple admission healed something that had remained tender, despite the external trappings of success. Recognition, even belated, of my role in supporting the family validated the years I'd spent balancing my ambitions with their needs. Sarah leaned forward, her expression earnest. "I need to apologize too. I was so focused on what I thought I deserved that I didn't consider what you'd earned. The room issue was just a symptom of how I've approached things, expecting results without putting in the work first." Her insight surprised me. "That's remarkably self-aware." She smiled ruefully. "Turns out getting exactly what you demand isn't always satisfying if you haven't earned it. Watching you build all this from nothing made me realize I've been taking shortcuts." "Your new job wasn't a shortcut," I pointed out. "You worked hard on your portfolio. Only after I had the space to do it properly," she countered. "You created your success from a shared bedroom, saving every dollar, working overtime for years. I demanded the perfect studio before I'd proven I would use it effectively." The conversation marked a turning point in our sibling relationship, a mutual recognition of the other's journey without competition or resentment. We were finding our separate paths, while acknowledging the different routes we'd taken to get there. As the evening concluded, we stood on my front porch, looking across at our childhood home illuminated in the darkness. "It's strange having you so close but not under our roof," Mom admitted. Her arm linked through Dad's. "I'm still here," I assured her. "Just with healthier boundaries." Dad extended his hand, man to man. "You've built something impressive here, son. Not just the house, the life you're creating." We shook hands, the gesture symbolizing our evolving relationship. No longer parent and child, but adults with mutual respect. In the months that followed, our family dynamic continued evolving. Sarah found an apartment closer to her new job, establishing her own independence with the lessons of my experience clearly influencing her approach. She took on a roommate to share expenses, created a realistic budget, and focused on building her career foundations before seeking luxury. Mom began dropping by regularly, not with casseroles for her poor bachelor son, but with questions about investments and retirement planning. Our roles had shifted. She now valued my financial expertise and sought my guidance. Dad and I established a new weekend tradition, home improvement projects, where he served as consultant rather than director. We rebuilt my back deck together, his experience complementing my enthusiasm. Our conversations moving gradually from construction techniques to deeper topics, his hopes for retirement, his regrets about pushing too hard, his pride in the man I'd become. My relationship with Jessica deepened as well. 6 months after moving in, I gave her a key to my home, a significant step for someone who had fought so hard to establish this space as exclusively mine. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. "Are you sure?" she asked, the key gleaming in her palm. "I've learned the difference between sharing from obligation and sharing by choice," I explained. "This is definitely the latter." My professional life flourished under the new division leadership. The team I built combined innovative thinking with practical healthcare experience, developing solutions that improved patient outcomes while streamlining clinical workflows. Our first major product launch exceeded revenue projections by 30%, establishing our division as a growth center within the company. One evening, almost exactly a year after the fateful birthday dinner ultimatum, I sat in my home office gazing across at my parents' house. The view had become a daily reminder of how unexpected challenges often lead to greater opportunities than we could have planned. The bedroom that had been the center of such conflict was visible through its window. Sarah's art studio for several months, now repurposed as a guest room since her move. The space that had seemed so crucial, so worth fighting over, had simply evolved with changing family needs. I realized that the most valuable lesson from this experience wasn't about property or finances, but about self-worth and boundaries. True respect isn't granted automatically by family ties. Sometimes it must be claimed through difficult choices and clear boundaries. Loving someone doesn't always mean yielding to their demands, especially when those demands undervalue your contributions. The house across the street had begun as a response to perceived injustice, a dramatic statement of independence. It had transformed into something far more meaningful. A home where I'd discovered my capacity for leadership, nurtured new relationships, and ultimately helped heal family wounds from a position of strength rather than resentment. Sometimes the best way forward isn't fighting to stay where you're undervalued, but building something better within view of those who failed to appreciate your worth. The ultimate satisfaction doesn't come from proving others wrong, but from proving to yourself what you're capable of building when forced to start fresh. Looking back at that dinner ultimatum now, I realize it wasn't the end I'd feared, but the beginning I needed. Sometimes, being pushed out of your comfort zone is the catalyst for creating something far better than what you were desperately trying to preserve. Have you ever faced a situation where what seemed like rejection became your greatest opportunity? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of standing up for your worth resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Share this with someone who might be struggling with family boundaries. Sometimes seeing someone else's transformation is the permission we need to make difficult changes in our own lives. Thank you for listening, and remember, the view is always clearer when you build your own vantage point.